Welcome to Last Day on Earth community, it's Chris Colby. This video will not be as informative, but rather my review on Update 1.9 and how to improve some of the changes that were made from this update. I know this may seem a little delayed since a couple of updates come up since 1.9, but one of those updates was put a few hours after the first one, so 1.9.2 was more like 1.95. Another reason I've waited this long is to actually get a good feel for this update. I feel it's hard to judge an update right when it comes out or just from the patch notes because we haven't had any time to test the items, mechanics, or anything else that might be implemented within the patch. Let's first read the patch notes and then we will go over it with my analysis of each point, and we will also cover some of the hidden changes that affect and tie into the changes they outlined here. The added weapon customization. Create your own unique weapon. The gunsmith bench functions was modified. Now you can modify all types of weapons there. Plans for modifications. Look for them in the bunker, airdrop, red locations, and get them for disassembling firearms. New resources, adhesives, springs, large bones, carbon composites, and factory parts. You will need them not only for modifications. New reputation rewards for the specialist, and the entry price for Sector 7 was decreased. We will cover the first 3 points as they all tie into each other. I love the customization feature this adds to the game. Even the consistency in which we get blueprints is pretty good, but it has to be improved as it is now being left completely to RNG to find them. And since there are 175 blueprints, leaving this up to luck to find them all isn't the same as having one super rare item like the gas tank. If we can't find a blueprint that we specifically want, we will be feeling very disappointed yet again. As an example, I bought 30 files of blueprints and managed to get about 80% of the gun blueprints and 90% of the melee weapon blueprints. And I have been receiving some blueprints in the game, but I have yet to receive any ones that I didn't obtain when I bought the 30 files. Within this bad experience, I don't plan on spending any more money on any files because the odds are so bad, and Kafir still leaves it completely to RNG to determine if we will get the ones we don't have. If anything, I will get slowly more and more upset because if I don't find those blueprints that I am missing and still really want them, then that frustration will build up, and among other things that they implement in the game that also upsets us. Guess how much money I spent on another game when I left this one? It was over $500. Maybe if I would have stayed with Last Day on Earth, I would have only spent half of the money. But at least it's money you are receiving rather than another game developer, and maybe even one that can be your competitor. I'm sure I'm not the only person that this will happen to, as a few other streamers and game content developers have already left for similar reasons, and even ones that are way, way more popular than me. While we are on the topic of money, most players felt this update was initially for another way for Kafir to push this for pay to win. But honestly, in the long run, it also benefits us. As a simple example, before the shotgun would normally do 70 damage, but now you can make it do 80 with some modifications, increases in effectiveness by a lot, since we don't have to spend an extra shot to kill those 80 HP zombies. Some of the other upgrades initially seem a bit disappointing, like the durability buffs for some other weapons, but further testing needs to be done to really get a good feel for what are the best combos for weapons, and we still need to see what the active mod skills modifications will do. Speaking of the active mod skills, I hope this isn't one of those mechanics that Kafir drags their feet on implementing it into the game. It has been rumored that the farm update, which is right around the corner, will release some of the melee active mods for skills, but only time will tell. Moving on to new materials. Springs, large bones, adhesive, carbon composites, and factory parts. Let's go over each one individually. Large bones. I have no complaint about this item. Its rarity is fine since it's not in high demand, as the number of large bone needed to complete blueprints isn't extremely high. Even now that I'm stuck at having 2 out of 3 for the big 1 bone upgrade for the metal pipe, it isn't making me have the strong urge to buy something in the game that will help me get this bone, like a lot more guns to kill the blind one because the big one, because it guarantees that when you kill the big one, you will get a large bone. Part of the reason also is that the upgrades that need large bones also have negatives, mainly in the form of durability. Altogether, 12 large bones are needed in 4 mods, and one is even the spear that is a melee weapon that is hardly used. Moving on to the springs. They were changed from weapon parts to springs, so a lot of people were already stacking up on these from before, and it's the most common item we get when we put a gun into the recycler, so no complaint here either. But I can see why Kafir changed it to this, since before a weapon part would be considered too general of a material needed to upgrade a weapon. This allowed him to make room for other types of materials like carbon composites and factory parts. These are are the two extremely rare materials that you get when you put guns in a recycler, and it seems so far that's the only way to get them. I would suggest to implement these as an item we get in a floppy disk crate and remove all the paints to make room for these, but obviously you would still have to leave the white paint can. And if we get at least each one of these materials in a floppy disk crate, it would be a great improvement. Moving on to the adhesive. This is the one that I do have a major complaint about, as it affects other mechanics that were changed in this update, which is melee weapons don't make noise in a raid. While everybody is initially looking at this to be a great modification to the game, most people have overlooked the fact that when you use a melee weapon, you are also subject to receiving damage from zombies. Since in a raid, you are swarmed by a lot of zombies at one time, they will break your armor a whole lot quicker than if you were kiting them with a gun, because you will hit one zombie, but you will get hit by multiple zombies all at once. So this isn't a great buff as everybody else is making out to be. Furthermore, one thing that can be improved is to remove the skill Quiet Gunner. Let's be realistic here. Since we can now use melee weapons without making noise at a raid, players are less inclined to use a gun that has a silencer, and there is absolutely no reason to use a gun that does not have a silencer. So this skill has now become a lot less useful, almost obsolete. Moving on to the adhesive material itself and how it relates to the previous point I made about melee weapons and not making noise in raids. There are a total of 19 recipes that now require adhesive, and 11 of those are for armor. 7 of those 11 are required to upgrade 2 of the lowest ranked armors that are craftable in the game. Not only that, but adhesive is also used in 2 of the cheapest ranged weapons, which are the bow and zip gun. These ranged weapons weren't already being used, and now they become more expensive, and the modifications for them don't seem to be great. So I really hope that the active mods for these weapons make up for all this. Otherwise, Kafir is in an indirect way hinting that they are never going to allow us to craft guns in a way that is worth the resources to craft those guns. And that will upset even more people, because from the start of this game we were given false promises of all these cool items that we were going to be able to craft, and so far it seems like they just keep getting pushed further and further away out because of other implementations that were in the game without an explanation of why they keep getting pushed back, or they keep getting nerfed, like in the case of the bow and zip gun now costing more and the modifications not being so great. Going back to the original point that armor now requires this new material. This is a huge nerf to armor since we didn't have glue stockpiled before. While I do agree that upgrading either one of these armors was fairly cheap, this isn't the nerf that was needed to make this balance. Simply increasing the number of materials that were already needed to make those upgrades happen was enough. As an example, before this update, all that was required to upgrade this armor here was 6 iron plates, 6 leather, and 6 nails. If Kafir would have increased this to each one of those materials, it would have been fine. Or if they really wanted to include glue in each one of the recipes, they would have started off by making the requirements for glue needed to upgrade these armors a lot cheaper, and eventually increase it at a later time, but also letting us know that change would come, so when the change was made, we wouldn't be as upset. And even if either one of these changes were implemented, but there would still be a drawback, since this material requires a snooze slot for us to bring back when we go mine for materials. As an example, when we go to a red zone to mine for logs, we would get about 300 logs for each visit. Now we have to spend 1 extra slot to bring the adhesive back, so on average would be knocked down to 280. That adds up over the like a long course. The more and more times we go and mine, the less logs we're getting each time. On top of that, since we're opening up a whole new slot to bring back glue, we don't get glue, when you just simply visit one red zone. You're lucky if you get 5. So the odds so far of finding it aren't extremely high either. It's not a rare item, but it's the odds of finding it are not as easy as some of the other materials that we can mine for. Moving on to the next point, new reputation rewards for the specialist. This was mainly updated to now include blueprints. A suggestion I would make is to allow us to pick which rare blueprint we want and which extremely rare blueprint we would like to receive when we reach those levels. Like I mentioned before, there's too much RNG in the game, and that's what causes the community to be disappointed a lot with this game. So by allowing us to pick what rare blueprint we want and what extremely rare blueprint we want, you would also help us in increasing the odds of finding the blueprints that we haven't found just yet. Moving on to the price of Sector 7 has been decreased. Here is the comparison of materials needed before and after this update. Thank you, Kafir, for reducing this. It shows you want more people in multiplayer, and therefore showing that you're also making progress to making this game more PvP. There are a few other changes to other items and mechanics in this update, but I don't feel those impacted the game as much as the ones that I've already gone over. Overall, I would give this update a 7 out of 10 review and really hope that Confir takes the suggestions I've made to improve some of the mechanics they implemented in this patch. Thanks for watching. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe button. Maybe even leave a comment or two, and be looking for my next 2 videos. One will be the top 5 melee weapon upgrades and the top 5 gun upgrades. Thanks. See you next time.